Welcome to the New Big Five podcast. I'm Graham Greene. My guest today is the American photographer Ami Vitale. Ami, thanks for being on the New Big Five podcast.
Hi, Graham. Thanks for having me.
Ami is a photojournalist for National Geographic. Over the years, she's shifted from reporting on conflict zones like Kosovo, Kashmir and Palestine to covering stories from the front line of conservation, wildlife and climate change, from rhinos in Kenya to pandas in China. She's also been awarded 5 World Press Photo Awards. Ami, you sound like someone on a mission. I wondered, where did that drive come from for you? Was it something personal that made you want to go out into the world to find and tell these stories?
I think it probably began from being a very painfully shy, introverted child that was really afraid of people, afraid of this world. And something about picking up the camera gave me like this hidden superpower. And all of a sudden, it took the attention away from me and allowed me to focus on others. I think I always had this sense of curiosity, but was just too afraid. And then once I had my little passport, to exploration, there was no going back. I mean, then I was really on a mission. And I really, I think I'm grateful to discovering photography and the camera because it really is what empowered me. And then as I started getting more and more into storytelling and, realizing the power of sharing these stories and visual storytelling, then I realized that I could amplify other people's voices and now even other animals and creatures' voices. And that's a really beautiful thing to discover.
Yeah, because with your work, you're not just a photographer, you are a photojournalist. It is about stories for you, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's wonderful to look at a beautiful image, but it has to have meaning for me. That's where the teeth of it come in and have impact. I want people to look at a photo and instantly recognize and feel empathy and understanding. And I think that's the beauty of photography. It's like no matter what culture, where you come from, who you are, what your background is, language, photography transcends all those things. It is the greatest communicator. It transcends, country and culture and religions and can be these things that connect all of us. And that's really what I seek to do, because I feel like, we have the ability to, if we want to see the things that divide us, they are there. But if you dig a little bit and also look for the things that connect us and remind us of our shared humanity, they are also there. And those are the stories I seek.
Your interests are in those positive stories. You want to talk about changes possible.
Well, I believe it's important to talk about the challenges. And I am not Pollyanna here. I do not just paint the world as this, perfect place. But I think once you talk about the challenges, we have to also give people, where are the solutions? I mean, sometimes they're not there, but let's look for what can we actively be doing to find answers to the world's most pressing challenges. And I think that if you leave that part of the story out, it's a deep injustice because, frankly, there are these incredible things happening. And I see change happening not always because of governments or big institutions. I see it happening through individuals and communities. And that's why I believe it's really important to find those stories to remind us of what we can achieve if we really put our minds to it.
Of the many wildlife stories that you've covered, I know that you were present at the death of Sudan, the last Northern White Rhino in Kenya. I wondered, what impact did being present at that moment have on you?
Oh, I'm still trying to process because it had a huge impact, both on me individually and I think it had an impact in the way, I think it did exactly what I hoped for. I think it woke people up. And I think what was so heartbreaking, it's a picture. Let me describe, since this is a podcast, it is a picture of the last male Northern White Rhino named Sudan in his final moments together with one of the keepers named Joseph Wachira, who loved and protected and took care of this rhino. And they were leaning into each other. So Jojo went to give him his last hug goodbye moments before he passed away. And Sudan leaned his heavy head right into Jojo. Jojo is his whatever his nickname, but it was Joseph and Sudan in these final moments. And I think what was so heartbreaking about it was that you recognize when you look at it that human beings are both, you know, the protectors and the destroyers. And it was like witnessing our own demise. When you look at that photo, you realize that this isn't just the death of this ancient, gentle, hulking creature. It's the death of all of us. We are witnessing it on our watch. We're watching it happen in front of us. And it was a really powerful metaphor and heartbreaking and yeah,
Mm.
I also think, like, when I look at that picture, when I think about that moment, I feel this deep sense of guilt too, because you recognize when you look at it, like, we are all part of the problem. We can also be part of the solution, but right now we are all part of this problem. It's something bigger than all of us.
Yeah.
This isn't, a moment of, just one animal. It's symbolic of what we are doing to this planet, to every living creature on it, including humanity.
It's obviously an important photo to exist. It's a story that needed to be told. But I know we've talked in the past, and you mentioned that it's also there's an ethical decision there, isn't there? It's a sensitive moment. It's a tragic moment. How do you weigh up that issue when you're taking pictures?
Well, I don't just parachute into places. I had been working on that story for 10 years and really working with the community there and other communities also in northern Kenya, both to create awareness, to help get them funding to do their important work. I have turned into much more than just a photographer documenting things. I believe that it's important to use every single platform, everything we can to empower them, to amplify their voices, to share these stories of, both the challenges and the hope that and the incredible work that they're doing. So it wasn't like I just showed up there. These communities, these people, these animals even knew who I was. I mean, Sudan recognized me too, because I've spent a long time being with them and continually going back to tell their story over and over again in every single way I can, from, both writing, photography, radio, filmmaking, even VR films, to try to tell these stories to, in this kind of desperate appeal to people, to just say, like, guess what? The future is in our hands. It is up to us. We cannot just sit idly by and think that somebody else is going to take care of this problem, that it's too big for us to deal with, because that is not going to be what saves us. What's going to be what saves us is if all of us start using our voices, start doing little acts of courage, little acts of love to support and help the people that are on the front lines, and protecting these last great spaces, these last great species. We are witnessing a level of destruction that we have never seen. I mean, I'm sure many of your audience knows we are in the sixth extinction. And what that means is we are witnessing extinction, and this time it's different. This time it is purely driven by mankind. I mean,
Yeah.
that is so overwhelming to think about, but I don't want people to get overwhelmed. I want that to inspire them to look out in this world and realize it is not too late. We have the most beautiful planet we live on, full of diversity, full of magic. Like, get out there and engage with it and feel the wonder. And once you fall in love, I think that gives you the courage to go out and fight for the little creatures that so
Yeah.
desperately need our help.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk there about the relationship that you've built with those people and that community. And I know that that's how you work. You work long term. You go back to stories. You're engaged with people. And I'm interested because you mentioned that you're quite shy. And for me, I'm quite shy too. And one of the pleasures of journalism is that people invite you into their lives. Many people feel that maybe journalists work in an intrusive way, but for you as well, I think is that one of the great things about journalism is that you do get to go into people's lives, and actually they want your help, don't they, to shine a light on these stories.
Absolutely. And I think that, we all have different ways of working. But I think that, like it's sort of coming from this place of understanding that we ask a lot of people. We come in and so I work very hard to try to tread lightly and to give back to the people that open up their lives to us. And I know that you do the same, and it is, it's a tough thing to open up your life to share all of these things. And so I think we just have to treat it with great respect and humility,
Yeah.
and understand that it is such a privilege to be invited in to people's homes and worlds in the way that we are.
I know you're very involved with this story still, and I understand there's a sort of next chapter coming with Sudan and with this species. Could you just update people? It's there's some pretty interesting science happening, isn't there?
It is this beautiful twist of fate,
Yeah.
because this story that was so heartbreaking. I mean, I could barely talk about it before without weeping. This story that almost destroyed me, has magically into a story of hope, because right now it looks like that this animal may be brought back from extinction. There's this international consortium of scientists and conservationists, and I'll just go through who they are. It's the Leibniz Institute for Zoo and Wildlife Research, the Avantia Lab in Italy, Old Pegida Conservancy, the Kenya Wildlife Service, and the Safari Park Dvor Kralo from the Czech Republic. And these people are working together to get the eggs from the last two female northern white rhinos. And they then, they first harvest the oocytes, which are the immature egg cells, and
Mm.
then they have to jump on a plane and within 24 hours transport them to this laboratory in Italy, because you can't freeze the immature egg cells. And then they incubate them, wait for them to mature, and fertilize them from the frozen semen of those now, the last males that are no
Yeah.
longer, none are alive. And so they've actually already created three viable embryos, which are frozen. They're storing them in frozen nitrogen and in liquid nitrogen. And then the plan now is to transfer them into surrogate southern white rhinos in the near future. And then the incubation period, the period that it will take to actually create a baby is we're a few years off.
Mm.
But the hope is that they can actually create babies that would then be living together with the last two female northern white rhinos, so that they know how to be a northern white rhino.
It's a little bit lacking in romance, isn't it? But it's incredible science.
It is. And, my hope is that actually this science is really important because it's not just science that will be used only on the northern white rhinos. It has the possibility of saving so many other species. It is terribly exciting because it's
Mm.
never been done. And, and they're also working with an organization that is really monitoring the ethics of all of this. So it is being monitored.
I guess it is
Yeah,
kind of Brave New World stuff, isn't it? It is, a this is the sort of world that we're entering to, where science can throw up these ethical issues, and as you say, someone does have to monitor that because we could get into some pretty interesting territory.
exactly. No, it's incredibly important, and they are working absolutely with these, going through these really rigorous questioning
Yeah.
and making sure that is addressed. They're doing this comprehensive ethical assessment, and it's being carried out by the University of Padova.
Another species that you've spent time with, of course, is pandas. I know that you had some assignments in China and your book, Panda Love. You had to wear a panda costume. I wondered, first of all, is it hard to rock a panda suit?
It is hard to rock a panda suit, particularly when it is scented with panda urine,
Mm.
because
This is the glamour of the job, no?
yeah, I mean, I get all these wonderful young photographers aspiring to work for National Geographic. They're like, I want to do this. And I'm like, do you? Do you really? No, it was wonderful in many, many ways, but that was part of it. I mean, the idea was that the pandas that are being returned to the wild should never be comfortable around a human being. So we had to dress up in these panda costumes that pandas go by smell, not sight. So it
Mm.
wasn't really the costume, it was just covering ourselves up as humans. So we had to get out there and no close contact with them, but to kind of try to behave like a panda. Pandas are actually really quiet, solitary creatures, and I would just have to hide out in thick bamboo forest, not make much movement, and try not to have any interaction.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it was just staying as far away as possible and not having any impact. But yeah, the story was one which really surprised me because we've turned them into these kind of slightly cartoonish characters. We're used to seeing them, as stuffed animals and in, in storybooks and that's not actually how they are. They are really, I mean, the fascinating thing, I read everything I could about pandas, so much so that I literally started to feel like I was thinking like a panda while working on this story. But it was amazing because they've been on this planet for millions of years, but were only discovered to humanity the first ones were shot in 1927, and the first ones were captured alive, I think it was 1936. So not that long ago. And how did they remain that elusive, that unknown to humanity? Well, they would just hide out in these thick bamboo forests, really away from humanity. They had adapted their diet of being these, like every other bear, a predator who, is carnivorous. They adapted to a diet primarily 99% bamboo. So they just hide out in thick bamboo forest, and they just wanted to be quiet and stay away. And they have more in common with rhinos than they do other bears because they are really solitary. They only come for breeding um, once every year, uh, and they only have 24 to 72 hours to get together to breed. That's it. And then they'll stay away from each other for the rest of the year. And that's the only time you'll see them together unless they have a baby. And then the mothers will stay with their babies for 2 years. And then they
Like,
get sent off to the wild.
it's such a nice idea that they are out there hiding. I guess it also gives us a bit of a possibility that there are other animals out there in the world that we just haven't found yet, either in the oceans or in the forests. And I guess it emphasizes that need to protect these areas. There could be anything out there, couldn't there?
Absolutely. Like we know so little, and how incredible is that? And the other piece of the story that I love, it's a it's a story that when we think about China, we do not think about it being this particularly, environmentally conscious country. But actually, it is a story that surprises you because they took one of the most endangered animals on the planet, and 1 month after we published it, it was actually delisted. They are performing a minor miracle. It is one of the few countries in the world where forest coverage is growing. They're taking existing habitat and protecting it, and they're also reforesting other areas and connecting existing corridors for pandas and for a whole host of other species. And I think that it's a story to inspire us. And if they can start reforesting areas and connecting corridors and becoming one of the few countries in the world that is growing habitat, I mean, that's amazing. Can't we all emphasize that too?
I'm just going to pause for a moment there, Amy. I want to explain to people listening that this podcast we're doing is part of the New Big Five project, where we're creating a new Big Five of wildlife photography. The old Big Five was based on the toughest animals in Africa for hunters to shoot and kill. The new Big Five that we're setting up is all about wildlife photography rather than hunting, and it's about wildlife from around the world. So I want to ask people listening to go onto the New Big Five website, newbig5.com, and to vote for their own personal choices of 5 animals they'd like to be included in the new Big Five. On the website, we've also got many articles and interviews looking at things to do with wildlife, conservation, and climate change. Amy, you were the first photographer that I spoke to who came on board with the new Big Five and offered to help. So I wanted to say thanks for that.
Oh, thank you for what you're doing. I love the whole ideology behind this. I am so excited to work with you on this.
So, Amy, I'm asking every photographer that I speak to name their personal top 5 of wild animals to photograph or to see in photos. What would be the 5 animals that make it into your list?
Okay, that is the most difficult question today because if I can't narrow it down, but I mean, if I must, let's do this. Okay, so let me put right at the top of the list the Ethiopian wolf. It is the most endangered carnivore and the only wolf species on the entire continent. Um, and it's really hard to choose just 5, but we'll start with that, and then the African wild dog. They are such an incredible species as well, and I mean, I think that they're also really going through a difficult period right now, and
Mm.
people even poison them, and they are fascinating. I don't know if any of your listeners have ever had the chance to follow them, but how they work in the most collaborative way, and I mean they're really incredible creatures. I would say the mountain gorilla, giraffes, specifically the West African giraffe, who
Mhm.
only have 600 left,
Wow.
and then the eye. This flat-faced, big-eyed, elfish little creature is native to Madagascar and was thought to be extinct before it was rediscovered in the early 1960s. It is one of the world's largest nocturnal primates, and it uses its fingers to tap on trees to find grubs, and then it gnaws through the wood and picks them out with its little finger. And This population is endangered thanks to, again, habitat loss. That's the biggest threat to almost everything out there. I also read that these animals have dwindled because of the superstition too, because some people believe seeing one will predict the death of a villager in ancient Malagasy legend. So
Mm.
that is really specific to Madagascar.
That's great. And of all of those 5, if this will be an even harder question, what would be your number 1 favorite animal to photograph and to see in photos?
Oh, I just can't. But what I will do is tell you that I had the privilege of spending time with the West African giraffe last year. And there is an incredible story unfolding there. I mean, that animal was down to 49, 49 of them left on the planet. They were
Wow.
all poached almost to complete extinction. And this is something that I wish everybody would know. But the government of Niger realized that they had 49 left. And you have to understand that is a very impoverished country with little infrastructure. They also are struggling with, different terrorist groups like Boko Haram. And to make wildlife a priority as something that they should protect and save is extraordinary. They should be winning a prize because they went into the communities and told them, look, you have 49 of these left. We have to protect them. And the communities over the past 2 decades have been protecting these animals. Now there's over 600 of them. And I think that is one of the most successful conservation stories of this century.
Mm.
It's beautiful. And they are the most adorable animals. They've actually become so used to living side by side with humans that you can almost walk up to them. They're literally eating people's crops. And again, it's a desert landscape, not a lot. I mean, there's incredible poverty there, and food is precious, and the people somehow manage to live side by side with them. And I have these incredible stories about meeting a man who 70 years ago, they had never seen giraffes. They didn't even know what it was. And he said he was a child herding his goats. And he runs into a giraffe who just stops and stares at him. And he stares back and he's terrified. And he said, I thought this animal, this creature, I didn't know if it was going to eat me or kill me. I looked at it and I thought, that must be the work of the devil because of its ossicones, the little horns sticking out. He thought, that's got to be, something that the devil created. And then he, flash forward, he's in his 70s or 80s now. And he said, now, today, I know this animal is the work of God.
Wow. Wow.
And it was just so touching. And, these are the kinds of stories I just want to focus my energy on because if they can be out there protecting this animal, why can't all of us, frankly?
When I see giraffes, I always think it's almost like we live on an alien world. They look like something that, almost doesn't belong to the world. They're a strange animal in some ways, aren't they?
Oh, they are. They're so mysterious and so full of, again, I keep using this word wonder, but I love them because they'll kind of run away, but then turn around and just stare at you and then inch their way, coming back, creeping, walking towards you because they are as curious about us as we are about them. And they cannot resist. They'll always come back. I mean, that's one good thing to any amateur photographers out there. With giraffe, you just have to stop and stay still, and they will always turn around and come back. But they are a creature, across Africa, their numbers have dropped 40% in just 3 decades, plummeting from approximately 155,000 from the late 1980s to some say 110,000, some say even under 100,000 today.
That's a surprising thing, I think, for a lot of people to hear because anyone who goes to Africa, they tend to see giraffe and I guess it's like lions. We think they're so strong and that they're probably doing okay. And then behind the scenes, there's this story of the numbers plummeting, like you say.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, I think they're always like the footnote in every single story about Africa. You just always assume that the giraffe are there. But I think what people don't realize is that there's all these um, subspecies, and actually scientists are saying that they may even be their own distinct species because they are so dramatically different genetically from one another. And the reticulated giraffe number fewer than 16,000. And then there are actually two other species of giraffe that are critically endangered. Their numbers are even fewer. I mentioned the West African giraffe, but there's also another species. So, overall, they definitely need our help. And the reason is not poaching. I mean, there is some poaching, but that is not the reason. The reason is habitat. Habitat is the single most important issue that we all need to be focused on.
It's interesting because all the animals that I keep talking to photographers about and conservationists about, people talk about their favorite animals, and there's very few of them that aren't facing either, on a critically endangered list, on an endangered list, in need of some sort of protection. All the animals we care about are facing some kind of risk.
Oh, it's shocking, but we're at this crossroads now where we see the future unfolding right in front of us. We know what's coming. And frankly, their demise is our own demise. To think that we're somehow separate from nature is the biggest issue I want people to realize. And when people feel hopeless, sorry, I can't talk. When people feel hopeless about it, it's like, well, that's not going to save us. That's actually, it's okay to feel that despair. I mean, listen, we all do, but take that and channel it into what you can do in your own backyard. Don't worry about traveling across the planet. Save what's in your backyard.
Mm.
Save these last great spaces. Habitat is the most important issue we all need to focus on. So there's a host of so many species, big and small and microscopic, that you don't even see, that need those habitats. So that is the biggest issue. If you can help support the parks and the wildlife and the things in your own backyard, start there.
It's nice that you also included in the animals you talk about some of these less known species. I mean, we are focusing on things like lions and gorillas and some of the big animals, but we are also really keen to flag up some of these, what I call unsung heroes, these little animals or animals that just people don't know about. Maybe you'd like to flag up one of your favorite unsung heroes, Amy.
Yeah, the eye would definitely be it. And I'm always rooting for those smaller, lesser known creatures, but they're extraordinary. They don't come close to any other creature on this planet. Really, a fascinating creature. I would also say the tree kangaroo. They are the most adorable creatures from rainforest in, Indonesia. I think they're also in Papua New Guinea and maybe Queensland. And they look like a cross between a kangaroo and a lemur. And they are really kind of adorable. They have these cute little ears, and I love kind of any creature that spends most of their time up in the trees. Um, but because of deforestation, illegal logging, poaching, they are also being pushed dramatically close towards extinction. And
Yeah,
it's
it's
just so hard to imagine a world without out these they 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 give us all of our inspiration. I
yeah,
feel like look at our art, look at even, fashion and everything creative comes from the natural world.
yeah.
Almost everything that inspires us comes from nature. So how can we have a world without them? I just can't imagine.
We've talked about some of the challenges and the problems in the world, but one of the great joys of being a wildlife photographer or a journalist is really seeing that wonder you talk about, like those animals, and getting to see just how incredible the world is.
Absolutely. And for me, it's not just the stories of these, magnificent creatures, but actually the human story is just as fascinating to me. I am constantly inspired by people who often have very little, political power, very little resources, and they are out there doing the impossible, creating a different destiny in their own worlds, in their own communities. And that is so deeply inspiring. It's easy for people to sit and watch the television from their home and think that the world is this terrible, dark, scary place full of horror. And that is not the world I know or the world that I ever experience. even in the toughest places, the most unexpected stories are always there. And yeah, I mean, I I will never stop seeking those out because they make you want to be a better person. And if it's the wildlife that gets you out there and inspires you, great, get out there. But if it's, the stories of humanity, please seek those out too, because people are not all bad. I think we need to remind ourselves um, that there is room enough for all of us, and that the thing that is going to save us is a little bit of empathy. It
Yeah.
goes a long way.
It's difficult sometimes, I think. There's a lot to be pessimistic and concerned about in the world. We've started this year with fires in Australia, last year in the Amazon, the fires, and we know about climate change. A lot of the people that I'm talking to, photographers and conservationists, they do come out with that message that you can either do something or you can do nothing. Do you agree with that idea?
Oh, 100%. I think that, and by doing something, it gives you so much energy, and you start to realize how much you can do. The power of one individual is real. I just see it over and over, just these stories. Yeah. And I think on a personal level, it helps all of us to get through that deep despair. I actually don't watch television anymore. I just get out, engage with people instead. And that gives me a far different view of this world. And that is not to say that, I mean, it's important to understand what's happening. Climate change is real.
Yeah.
We are facing, incredible rates of extinction all around us. All of that is real.
Mm.
But if you are only guided by that, it's not going to get you out of bed every day. I think that we have to find other ways to inspire us to get out and do something.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to touch on was that I was following your story on Chad, and it seems that this year, probably more than any other time, we really feel like we're living in the time of climate change. We did start off with those fires, and I think I wanted to ask really about your experience in Chad, where you're seeing these effects of climate change, which is causing serious difficulties for the people there, conflict, I understand. We are living in the time of climate change now. We're not waiting for it to come, are we?
No, I mean, no, it's real. I think for a lot of people in, sort of Western countries have the privilege to, or cities, I think maybe urban places where you have a little bit of a disconnect between the natural world. So you may not see, this worsening trend. But when you get out, you realize that it has turned once lush lands into dust and blinding heat, and the inability to feed their cattle and animals, and droughts are they're more frequent, more long lasting, um, and it's leaving people in this really desperate place, um, bringing them into conflict with each other. So I see it firsthand, all over the place. I mean, I'm now in Kenya, on my way up to northern Kenya, and they were so lucky and got all of these great rains after decades of drought, and now they're experiencing this like almost biblical locust plague. I mean, locusts are, billions of them are just plowing through, eating all the crops, and so and they are caused by. I believe I just read that the locusts are also caused because of climate change. So you see it, and I see it in other places. Like I did a film about people really on the front lines in Bangladesh who, suffer more violent cyclones. It's more frequently happening, and flooding, and you're just seeing it. It's apocalyptic, and if so much of the planet, often the most vulnerable, are the ones on the front lines facing the impacts with very little coping mechanisms. So I think we need to wake up to that and again to realize that there's so much we can be doing, and to just sit and do nothing is the worst possible choice.
Amy, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I could happily talk all day, but I think we should end things there. I wanted to say thank you very much for being on the New Big Five Project podcast and for giving your support as well. It's really appreciated.
Oh, thank you so much for everything you're doing, and what a privilege, and I'm so happy to be on this. Thank you.
To everyone listening, please go onto the New Big Five website, newbig5.com, and vote for your choices to include in the New Big Five of wildlife photography. On the website, you can find many more podcasts, as well as interviews with photographers and conservationists, articles on climate change, conservation and the world's wildlife, photography tips, photo galleries, and plenty more. Please help us spread the word about the New Big Five project by sharing it on social media. #NewBig5. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Vimeo. If you'd like to get involved with the project, drop us a line. Contact details are on the website. Thanks for listening.